Well, good afternoon, everyone. Well, water up to all of you. And this is the Westwood Lecture Series, which my predecessor, Mitch Daniels, started a number of years back. And we are very fortunate, my wife and I and our three little ones, to call Westwood our home. It's university property. It is university property for a community of scholars and curious minds. So this Westwood Lecture, which we have now expanded its scope and scale to a monthly series, has been just immensely impactful and popular to recognize across a wide range of intellectual disciplines our great colleagues, including Matt, and hear from him later today, on a topic of utmost importance for pediatric devices and a continuation of outstanding legacy we have here from Les Gaddis to George White. Where's George? Over there. Hi, George. Good to see you again. And with great turnout today, because this is a special edition of the Westwood Lecture Series. It's a special edition to recognize and thank and collaborate with PURA, Purdue University Retirees Association. And I want to, on behalf of your, always your employer, even when you're not getting paid, but former employer, but there's nothing former about the relationship, because we're always partners, we're always friends, always neighbors. Want to, on behalf of your university, say a big thank you to all of you for your many years and decades of outstanding contribution and service, for your continued interest to engage and support us. And we run into each other in town, but also in special places on special occasions like today's. So thank you for giving us a chance to take the special edition of Westwood Lecture on this important topic. And I'll let someone very special to introduce the speaker. And usually, you know, when you have like really important speakers, the opener doesn't introduce the speaker. The opener introduces the introducer. Charlene Sullivan.
The expectation just went up.
Oh, it's certainly befitting this special occasion this afternoon. Now, here's Charlene Sullivan, who has been a long-standing leader here in what is now the Daniels School of Business, and the president of Purdue University Retirees Association. Thank you so much for the partnership.
To talk, but I just have 2. So I wanted to take 1 minute to really thank the president and thank Vic Lechtenberg and thank the other people that were on my strategic thinking committee last fall to come up with this idea. And one of the things I learned about Vic is when you say something to Vic and he has an idea, he knows enough people still on campus, and he came over here and twisted the president's arm, and before you knew it,
arms still dangling from
here we were guests at Westwood, and that's wonderful. But my message is always to think about what is PURA trying to do, and I think PURA, the Purdue University Retirees Association, has as its charge to make your retirement years even more wonderful than you could do on your own. So we put together events, we do things together, we still act like we're part of the family and take care of each other. And so the one thing I wanted to ask you to do, I know you're going to enjoy this afternoon, but go out and talk to people. Talk to your PURA associates about what we're doing here. Come to the monthly meeting on Monday, bring a buddy, you know, it's all free. Just bring somebody in there and just show them. I think I used the phrase at the fall kickoff conference, that PURA is like a warm hug. Now, I don't know if everybody thinks that, but it can be like a warm hug. So go out and talk about your experience and come to our meetings. We've got special things planned through December. Look at our web page, stay up to date on what we're communicating with people, because that's how we all get better. And now I have the opportunity, and the only thing I can say is when I parked right next to Matthew, and I looked at that face and I thought, that has to be our speaker. And so we were trying to figure out, okay, which door do we come in? But I told Matthew, well, if I see him laying out on the ground outside, I'll know he went in the wrong door. But, okay, so Matthew, come over here and tell us about yourself.
Certainly.
And get us excited.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I've reached the age where I have to use these to do anything, so you'll have to allow me to do that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Waninger. I'm very pleased to be here today talk to you about a topic that I'm very passionate about. I'm not going to stand here and give you my whole CV, but just suffice it to say, I came out of the medical device industry. I did more than 25 years of product development for Cook Medical. In that time, I worked in regulatory for 25 years of interacting with FDA, getting products approved, getting clinical trials approved, advocating for different things at the agency. I ran what was the most successful project for them, and I think that's true still today. I was in charge of engineering globally for 5 years and had responsibility for global product development for the corporation. I ran a company for them. I started a company for them. So I've had a broad experience. In that time, I really developed a passion for pediatric devices and pediatric medicine. And I got that from being a Riley dad. I have 3 boys, and all 3 of my kids are Riley kids. Does anybody here have a kid or a grandkid or know somebody who's had a kid at Riley? During my time at Riley, I really got exposed to just what it's like for medicine and that aspect of medicine for newborns and very young kids. And I was really exposed to the needs that they have. During that time, I was in the NICU, and I had my kids in the NICU. They're all out. They're all very healthy now, thankfully. The nurses found out, because when you're sitting all day in the NICU, you talk to people, right? And the nurses found out I had some responsibilities in engineering at a medical device company. And I would show up, and it would be one nurse after another, just telling me, we need this, we need this, we need this. And so seeing that personally, and my kids being helped, hearing from the nurses on the floor of the needs of these kids has really made a lasting impression upon me. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about the need. I'm going to talk about why we are where we are, and then I'm going to share some of the great efforts that are going on here at Purdue. So you can see from the first graphic here, one of the things you need to understand is peds and kids and babies, these children all under 21 years old, have a number of different medical conditions that are just specific to children. Adults don't have them. And it's been estimated there's over 5,000 pediatric kinds of maladies that need to be treated. Pediatric patients, people under 21 years old, make up 25% of the population in this country. But only 10% of all healthcare spending is focused on pediatrics. Only less than 12% of the NIH research budget is focused on pediatric research. More than 80% of the devices that get approved every year could be used for pediatrics and kids and being able to treat some of their conditions, but they either had no labeling or no testing associated with it. And for the last 20 years, there's been about one major life-saving, life-sustaining device that's been approved by FDA for kids. And so you look at that and you think, well, how can that be? How can there be such need? How is it, we have the limited resources? Why aren't the devices for kids keeping pace with devices for adults? It's about a 5 to 10 year lag. Whenever something is developed for adults and adult medicine and conditions, that it finally gets translated to kids. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that first. And if you'll hang with me, I'll give you about a 3-minute summary of what it is to take a device to market. And then I can explain to you why we're stuck getting devices out for kids. And then I can explain to you what we're doing that's unique, that's helping to overcome those kinds of obstacles and hurdles. So in product development at Cook, If I'm at a major medical device company, I'm going to start, this outlines the process. You start with a clinical need. All the different products that Cook brought out, there's a particular clinical need that gets identified, usually in conversations with many physicians and surgeons, nurses, and the like. A group will start looking at designing a device that can address that particular need, that clinical need. And it's often a very iterative kind of process. It's brainstorming, you have a need, you're not sure what you're gonna need to create an event to fix it or to address it. And so you design and you iterate and you get to the place where you have something called an initial device, which is your prototype. And so that prototype is really a device that shows a proof of concept. This device can address this particular unmet clinical need. In a company, we would then look at moving that into manufacturing. There has to be a redesign of that device to design it so that it's easily manufacturable. You can't have a device that maybe I can make one of these in 3 days. You need to be able to make 300 an hour. So you work on the design and adjust the design to make things manufacturable. And companies like Cook and OrthoPediatrics, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, all these medical device companies have expertise around translating sort of research kinds of devices into something that's manufacturable and being able to use commercially, and being able to set up manufacturing processes for that. Once that's done, devices are made, testing is done in bench testing, animal studies. If there is a clinical study required, you'll have oftentimes multi-center institutions enrolling hundreds, if not thousands of patients. Often those are multinational kinds of studies, very expensive. Some of them we ran were in the $50 million range for a device for something that was coming out to treat a condition for adults. After the clinical study is done, all this data gets summarized into regulatory submission, and you seek an FDA approval so that you can put it on the market. Once you have your FDA approval, then you start talking with the hospitals and figuring out how you're going to distribute this, how you're going to price this, how is this going to get reimbursed from Medicare, Medicaid, and then you put it on the market, and hopefully it's economically successful. That is the general process for medical device development. Thank you for your patience in that. So what's the problem? A couple of things. There are a number of challenges, especially on the pediatric side, with this particular process. And oftentimes you will see an innovator, a physician innovator, come with an idea. They have an idea, they want to start a company, they maybe get some seed funding, they want to get that seed funding, and they have 2 colleagues in themselves, and the 3 of them are going to tackle that entire process that usually takes hundreds of people and millions of dollars to do. And the idea is they try to make and advance it as far as they can, working for years, hoping that they'll get to some point where they can maybe sell their device. They've shown enough promise in it that maybe one of the big companies will buy it. And so that's the kind of the typical startup company approach. Common challenges. Oftentimes, especially around the pediatric side of things, these groups are significantly under-resourced from the get-go. They don't have enough money, they don't have enough people to really make it all the way through that process and be successful. Oftentimes, they don't have the specialized knowledge that they need around manufacturing, around clinical trial design, around regulatory strategy and submission, marketing, reimbursement, all those things. They have a great idea, some fantastic research, very promising, and that is their area of expertise. But they may not have all the knowledge they need for the whole process. Oftentimes, devices coming from some of the physician innovators are not designed for manufacturability, and they have no experience setting up a manufacturing process. They don't understand that is a federally regulated situation. They have to adhere to a number of the federal regulations and be subject to inspection. They have to do everything under a quality system. And so there's a whole host of things that they just aren't aware of that take a lot of people and a number of years to create. Especially in pediatrics, we have clinical challenges because there are often fewer kids, fewer patients available for clinical trials. So I mentioned the 5,000 plus unmet needs. Oftentimes it might be 300 kids who have that. And you need a 1,000 patient study to prove statistical significance. So you get the point. They're just, in general, not enough kids to actively participate in clinical studies. The other side of it is there are a lot of parents who do not want to have their children involved in an investigational study. And they view it as they're protecting their child from an unknown type of treatment, and I can understand that and respect that. So it's very difficult to enroll kids in clinical trials for new devices. The trials are quite costly. I mentioned, tens of millions of dollars for some of these. And in the end, it's not attractive to venture capitalists. So the idea that hope is going to be our business strategy and hope that we're going to sell and hope that we're going to exit is not the most effective way and doesn't happen a lot. These are small markets. Venture capitalists are typically not interested in really small markets. They're looking at 3x return, 5x return, 10x return, and maybe you're not going to be anywhere close to that for a company making a device for kids. And often people don't know how to market their device. They don't understand how to get into hospitals and talk to buying groups. And so there are all these hurdles for any particular innovator and entrepreneur to try to take, even with a team around them, that just cause a lot of roadblocks. So to say the current model is not optimum for pediatric device development is probably an understatement, but it's really not. But it's the model that we seem to have and we seem to follow. So what are we doing about it? So we've been looking at, well, how do we reduce those challenges? I gave you a whole laundry list of things that we have to overcome. And we decided to take a look at how can we reduce this through a collaborative effort. How can we do this across entities where we have multiple entities working together to advance a pediatric medical device to the point where a kid can be treated? Let me pause. You guys feel free to interrupt me with any questions at any time, okay? I invite that. I'd much rather have a conversation, so please feel free to ask questions. So our approach is very Indiana-centric. And I think we are ideally suited to do this. I like to tell people we're very Midwestern, which means we kind of like to work together and do things together, just as a culture in this state. But in this state, we have, obviously, one of the best engineering schools in the world, one of the top biomedical engineering programs in the world. We have the largest medical school in the country. We have Riley Hospital, which is one of the top children's hospitals in the country. 11 of their 11 medical subspecialties are nationally ranked in the top 25. And we have incredible device companies in this state. We have Cook Medical, we have OrthoPediatrics. We have a number of orthotic companies, orthopedic companies in Warsaw. We have Roche, we have Lilly, we have so many different companies here that are rooted here in Indiana. And honestly, the large and the medium-sized companies, there are hundreds of them in our state. And so we are ideally suited to an approach where how can we come together and work together in a cooperative way where we all contribute our strengths and work together to bring something forward. So with that was the idea. And with that, we launched the Crossroads Pediatric Consortium in July of 23, a collaboration with Purdue and the IU School of Medicine, specifically the Department of Pediatrics, and Cook Medical. Since that initial launch, we have had another company, OrthoPediatrics, has joined us officially as part of the consortium. So this is a group. There's all the shiny, happy people, right? This is a picture of our leadership team. I tell everybody the strength of this effort is right here. It's the people and the interrelationships of so many people in this group. President Chang said it so wonderfully that there's nothing formal about relationships. That's exactly right. There are deep relationships between Purdue and the IU School of Medicine that are decades long. There are decades long, 50-year relationship with Cook Medical. We know each other very well. We've worked with each other in a number of capacities. So we've looked at coming together and let's focus our attention on the children. So our vision is to take Riley Children's Hospital clinical expertise. We've merged that together with Purdue's engineering capabilities and research abilities, and with industry partner proficiencies around product commercialization and development, and use that as a model to revolutionize pediatric care. We're going to address the ongoing national shortage for technologies for sick kids. We're very integrated with a group called the Indiana Clinical Translational and Sciences Institute, which maybe some of you have heard of. It's another group singularly focused on translating these technologies out of universities into the clinic. And we're very tightly integrated with the College of Engineering's Engineering Medicine initiative as well. Let me stop there. Are there any questions? I just gave you a lot of information quickly. Go ahead.
So out of this vision here, I'm assuming that Riley comes up with the idea, tells you what you need. They go to engineering, and engineering comes up with the actual plan or creates the device, and the industry partners then produce it, market it. Is that right?
I'm actually really glad you asked me that, because it's not so sequential. We actually, from the very beginning, try to be very collaborative about and have input about it from the very beginning. What I have heard from our clinicians at Riley is, so they've been bringing our engineering students in and looking at some unmet needs and looking at potential projects for senior design, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And what they have told me is they have adjusted their thinking, because originally that's what they were thinking. We know what the need is, and we already know how this should be fixed. We just need an engineer to come in and see it and figure out how, what materials and what design to address that, and then hand it off to the company. And they tell me they have radically changed their thinking, because now what they like to do is they don't want to propose a solution. What they have really enjoyed is our students coming in. And they said, we really do understand the clinical needs, and that is for sure. But they like to get the students in, or say other company representatives or some faculty to come in and have the engineers look at the unmet need. Because they tell me engineers ask different questions. And engineers ask very different questions than the med students and the other faculty. And the engineers will ask questions they hadn't thought of, which then makes them realize maybe some of this is process of how we're doing things, not just design. So originally I think that was their thought, but we are not taking that approach. We really try to get people in. The physicians are looking at it, engineering students or faculty are looking at it, or some of the company representatives are looking at it, and then coming up with here's the idea that I think we need to advance that will move forward. So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. Yeah.
I don't quite know how to say it. Indiana is a small state. These pediatric therapy issues are global, they're national. You have trouble getting more than 300 kids for a clinical trial. Could Indiana provide leadership and go national on this somehow to make this work better?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer is, yeah, I think we're ideally suited to do that. I think we are ideally suited to propose some of the solutions. I think we're ideal to provide some of that leadership. There are a number of people there. Myself, Ram Iyer, who is the global director for regulatory for Cook Medical. There's Professor Lottis, who is in the BME school on faculty with a long, 15 or more years of regulatory experience. We've been looking at ways to, maybe there's a new regulatory proposal where we could, a new route or a new option, a new strategy for being able to get a pediatric device approved without needing 300 or 1,000 patients. And FDA is very open to that, and they have some of their own ideas about that. So we're actually looking at, and I won't go into too much of the detail, but there are certain situations where you can take adult data that are still relevant, and you got to prove that are still relevant to a pediatric use. And FDA will, looking at your arguments, and scientific reasoning, we'll look at that and say, you know what, we can use that data. We don't need 300 more kids. We have, 600 adult cases here that actually are relevant. So there are other ways that we have to be creative, and there are ways we have to be creative statistically around adaptive trials and some other things. So, but I think we have those resources in the state to really comment on that and to participate in that and provide some leadership for that. Yeah.
So my question relates to your experience with your own children. You said
Yes.
that one of them at least was in the NICU, and the nurses were just fascinated to find out that you were an engineer and they wanted to talk to you about things.
Yes.
And then you said you were bringing these engineering students into the NICU. And this is not my area, but it seems like we've gotten really good at being able to keep teeny tiny little babies alive until they can really live a normal life. But my brain tells me that most of these pediatric problems are with kids that aren't in the NICU anymore.
There's some of that as well. There are problems within the NICU, and then there are problems, like you said, that are outside the NICU, that are not in neonatology, that are other areas of medicine still for children. I'll talk in a few minutes about a project that's actually around low resource settings, so like rural medical settings or even third world countries, and a project that we're involved in. So it's not just the NICU by any stretch of the imagination.
But as I was telling you, so many of the nursing students that we need want to work in the NICU.
Yes.
We can't have all the engineers want to work in the NICU.
I'll let you tell them that. No. No, but you're right. And there is a variety of interests among all the engineering students that I've interacted with. And we've seen in some of the research projects that in the classes and some of the senior design project, there's a wide variety of spectrum across many areas of medicine that people are interested in. So, all right. We have a threefold mission. We're involved in research for devices for kids, educating the next generation of pediatric innovators, and technology translation. My comments today are largely about technology translation and what we're doing, but I do have a slide or two at the end to talk about some of the educational initiatives that we have ongoing and some of the research initiatives towards the end. But our attitude is that we're going to leverage our relationships, we're going to leverage our resources, and we're going to come together. We're not going to require venture capitalist involvement because we're probably not going to get it anyway. So we're just going to figure out how to get this done ourselves together, okay? So let me go through a couple of examples. I'm going to talk about two pretty mature projects and then a handful of other early projects. So cardiac safety device for our first Riley patient. So let me tell you a little bit of this story. Faith Haggager is a Riley champion. She is a Riley patient. Faith was born with a very severe birth defect. It's called pentalogy of Cantrell, and it means that she was born with no sternum. It means most of her rib cage was not formed. Her heart and her organs were born outside of her body when she was born. It's a really severe defect. And most of these kids don't live past 18 months. Faith had dozens of surgeries, and her mom was a nurse. I'm sure that helped. So Faith is probably what we believe to be the oldest living person with this condition. And we were contacted about a year ago when she was 20, and still a Riley patient, in a situation where they were looking for some help. Faith has, because she's doesn't have the sternum and the ribs, her heart is just below her skin, and her heart can be seen beating just below her skin. It's unprotected. So if somebody hugs her too hard, or if she gets hit in the chest with something, it could be fatal because her heart is so unprotected. And so it's a project that we got involved in through, let me just go through the story. So Faith had a doctor, her physician at Riley, asked her, she said, "You're driving now, and you're 20 years old." She's a university student, still here in Indiana. I won't say where. And it's not south. Do you disable your airbags? What happens if you're in a car accident and your airbag goes off? And her mom and Faith, they're like, we don't know. She had like this umpire vest kind of a chest shield, but what do you do in a car accident? And so Faith and her physician got together and they made a pitch video. They made a homemade pitch video, and they played this for some of the BME students in Indy. So they made a pitch to the seniors, engineering students, biomedical engineering students in Indy, who all have to do a senior design capstone project. They have to choose which project they're going to do. So Faith and her doctor made this pitch video saying, "Please pick us. Faith has this condition. She needs a protective device for her chest. We need somebody who knows something about engineering who can design something to protect her." So there was a BME student team, these are undergrads, BME student team, who worked on that for a year, along with their mentor in Indianapolis. And so this group of 3 students created a design, a concept design. They made a prototype with their 3D printer, and they did a lot of engineering analysis around forces and accidents and stresses and materials and all those kinds of great engineering things you'd want to put in a 92-page report and sum up your year-long research on this project. They did an amazing amount of work as BME students, okay? So they had what was a small prototype. They couldn't make a full-scale one because they didn't have the equipment to do so. They had this report and they had, some idea of a design, but they didn't know what to do with it. So I got a call from cardiology last summer, from the chief of cardiology, and said, "We have this patient," and he told me this story. He said, "Can the consortium help take what the students did and figure out how to go from there to translating that into a commercial device so that she can have something that will protect her while she is driving her car?" So I got the prototypes, I looked at the 92-page report, and I reached out to OrthoPediatrics. OrthoPediatrics said, "Absolutely, we think we can help this patient." And they contributed a handful of their very senior people. Their vice president of engineering took a look at it. 2 of their very senior orthotists, prosthetists who do bracing and have for 25, 30 years, external bracing, they put a whole team of company people and said, "Connect them." So they connected me with their internal experts. I connected with the Riley physician, and then they got connected with the patient. And everybody got together and said, and I shared the report with the company of the students' work, and everybody got together and said, "Well, what can we do with this?" And they rolled up their sleeves and they said, "Yeah, I think we can absolutely do this." So, sorry, my apologies. Or because the students had done such great work, and it was almost there. They're just almost to the brink of maybe a commercial device. The industry partner was able to take their work, adjust the design to be a more commercial device, not a research device. They filed the paperwork with FDA. They helped the family submit for reimbursement with the insurance company, and Faith got her chest shield in 5 weeks based on the work that the students had done. And it was just a great picture of her here. There's Faith holding it. She calls it her turtle shell. That's her car in the background. That's the one she drives around. These are a few of the experts from OrthoPediatrics. It was an excellent first example of how a Riley physician, coupled with a few biomedical engineering students, coupled with some of us in the staff and faculty in the Weldon School, coupled with an industry partner, were able to work together and get a device for this young lady. And that was quite a success. And we think it's a good model, and it shows that this model of the collaboration that we're working from can be productive. I'll let you know, the Weldon School was so happy with how this turned out, they made a video about it. It actually turned into a little bit of a mini documentary that's just launched yesterday. So if you have an interest, and I encourage you to look at it because it's a very heartwarming story, and there's a lot of details. You hear from Faith and you hear from her mother and family about how they're affected by the students' work. And it's just something I think you might be interested in. It's on YouTube. You can search Purdue, BME, and Faith, and you'll find it. There's also a link on the Purdue Weldon School website. If you find the Weldon School website, you can find a link there. But it really documents in detail how this young lady was given a device. The second project, go ahead,
I have a question. I mean, you all had a name for what her problem was.
Mm-hmm.
So that means there's other people out there in the world that may not have a chest cavity, or chest protector. So how do you use that maybe to actually...
So you're right about it, and the YouTube video talks at the end about it. Her physician has, started thinking about that because she's a specialist in birth defects and genetics, and she has connections in other hospitals. And so she started searching around on, other message boards, other institutions, and found another one. And then she found a third one. And so we're very optimistic that this project that helped Faith, and it really changed her life. I'm not underestimating that. It really changed her life. We're hoping that that same project, then that product can be used for these other people. So, yeah. Another project that's very active right now is we have a project to develop a pediatric peritoneal dialysis catheter for little kids, less than 5 kilograms. We often think about for dialysis, needing to be performed for adults. We often think about there's an adult need for dialysis, but we really don't think about kids needing dialysis much. And in dialysis, a catheter is inserted into the arteries or veins, and a machine then takes the blood and cleanses it, and then returns it to the body in what's called hemodialysis. That technique cannot be used for little people like this. There's no way you can get a catheter into the veins and arteries of these tiny little babies. So there's a second technique that's called peritoneal dialysis, and I'll explain the process here in a minute. But there's a catheter that it gets inserted that's needed in order to perform this procedure. So this dialysis for babies that are born with acute kidney injury is life-saving. And this happens in rural areas. We especially see this in some of the third world countries, some of the African nations and things like that, where they don't have the medical infrastructure like we have, like we're blessed with in this country. They just don't have what we have. But they still have kids born with acute kidney injury. And so this technique is being used and kind of pioneered with a couple of physicians. I'll tell you about that in a second here. The problem is, if these kids don't get treated, 74% of them die. If they can get treated, and the treatment's less than a week, lots of them survive. Lots of them survive. And so this technique requires a specialized catheter to perform the technique. And so this is being, like I mentioned, Africa. This is actually done with Dr. Danielle Serrano, who's a nephrologist at Raleigh Hospital, and her colleague, Dr. Mignon McCulloch, who's at the Red Cross Memorial Hospital in Cape Town, South Africa. Those two physicians have been guiding a lot of the design as we have continued to work through this project. There's this International Society of Nephrology that has this whole initiative they call Saving Young Lives, specifically geared towards performing this technique in little tiny babies and being able to do this for a week and save their lives. And so we're very pleased to be working with both those physicians. So this treatment requires bedside insertion of a catheter. And it's not in the arteries and veins like you would think of with hemodialysis. Peritoneal dialysis is, I want to say, simpler, where you get a catheter insertion into the abdomen. You take a bag of fluid called the infusate, and you connect that with a catheter, and it goes into the abdomen. That sits for 4 to 6 hours. That solution is formulated in a way that it pulls waste products out like your kidneys would, and it pulls those waste products out into the solution. After 4 to 6 hours, you reconnect with an empty bag, and you let all of that fluid that now has the waste products the kidneys would have removed in it. It's a very simple technique. It really is about the only technique you could do with kids, and certainly with kids this little. It can be done overnight, while baby's sleeping. It's just really the gold standard for how these kids need to be treated. The problem is there's not a catheter on the market anywhere in the world. So the Crossroads team has created a catheter design specifically for little babies, specifically for this technique, and specifically to be inserted bedside. They've created some international property around it and the engineering prototypes for it. And so this is the team. And this is an ideal example of us working together again, okay? So the team had this proposal to create this device. They went to the Engineering and Medicine Initiative here at Purdue, and the college gave them $100,000 for seed funding so they could begin designing, they could begin prototyping, they could be able to buy equipment they needed in order to form prototypes, all those sorts of things, done in the Weldon School, done in Hugh Lee's lab with some of his graduate students. The catheter material, right now, doctors in Africa are using whatever they can find. Anybody remember the show MacGyver? Where he could just, that's literally what they're doing. They're finding chest tubes or drainage tubes or lung, whatever they can find to stick in the abdomen to do this procedure in these little kids because there is nothing. Through that experience, Dr. McCullough found a particular tubing that she liked that would be ideal for this application. It happens to be made by Cook Medical. So Cook Medical has been contributing the material. Engineering, the college here has provided money for prototyping. Dr. Lee's lab and the students have been making prototypes, and all of that prototyping has been evaluated and continued to be guided by the two physicians who are doing this procedure. They worked about a year on that, and they came up with what's in the picture here. It's kind of this helical shape. You can see there's no holes on the outside. There's holes on the inside. And the idea is to put that in the abdomen. They don't want tissues blocking it, so the holes are on the inside so that the catheter doesn't get plugged and everything can drain fine. There's a lot of engineering and design went into the hole sizes and the shape of this. And they got to a point where they made prototypes in, I think it was March. Dr. Serrano took them to Africa to Saving Young Lives training program and let them all try them out, and most of the doctors didn't want to give them back. And they said, we need this and we need it now. So what we've done is continue to move this forward. I had the students create a manufacturing instruction, which is kind of foreign, but it's something that shows that written instructions of here's how you build the prototype. It's something that you could take and step into, start forming a manufacturing process around. Cook Medical hired the grad student that's working on these prototypes this last summer and spent the summer not only having the grad student work on projects they wanted, but mentoring that student on how to start creating the design documentation and the manufacturing documentation that's going to be needed to take this further. Because the next step is we need to make these and we need to go use them in kids. We need to do a clinical evaluation. So Cook hired the student and has been mentoring them through the process of those initial steps to be able to manufacture. Myself and the folks at Cook and Dr. Lottis got together and we worked out the regulatory strategy for it. And so we have a well-developed regulatory strategy. In addition, the doctors and the regulatory folks created a clinical evaluation, a registry, and came up with the protocol on how will this be evaluated in kids. We did all that work ourselves because we're able to work together and collaborate and get in the room, and everybody has the expertise and be able to contribute to make those kinds of steps. So this project's sitting right now waiting for a company to decide, I'm ready to make devices for your first in human study based on, here's the regulatory strategy laid out, here's the clinical evaluation that you've already laid out, and here's the manufacturing instructions that we built around the assembly, commercial assembly for. So we're right on the cusp of somebody picking this project up, making devices, and the next thing is we'll be taking this to clinical evaluation. Any questions about that? Yeah.
What has been your experience, as you mentioned, it's an expensive process, of insurance coverage of these devices?
Insurance coverage? We haven't dived into that yet. Something like this, there was a prior product out on the market. It was taken off the market 3 years ago. That had reimbursement codes associated with it, so presumably physicians will get reimbursed through those existing codes. But it's one of the questions that we have to resolve. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we've been able to advance this one to the point that we now have corporate interest starting to come up. We put in a funding proposal to Riley Children's Foundation because they showed some interest in possibly funding next steps and trying to fund that clinical registry that it will involve sites in South Africa, maybe Kenya, maybe UK, certainly Riley, and possibly Canada. And so that's the scope of what we're trying to get done. Okay, so those are two fairly mature projects. Any questions about those? So I want to brag on our students a little bit. The students are doing phenomenal work. I have an entire presentation just filled with student prototypes that I gave Riley Children's Foundation. I'm not going to do that to you today. I'm going to give you 3 examples. But these are examples of senior design device projects, prototype devices that the students have done with mentorship that we're doing here on campus now.
Do the students in BME do I just read the thing, they do a senior design.
They do.
So every one of the students are going to come up with something.
That's right. And I have been jokingly accused of taking over senior design because I funneled so many ideas in the last year, but I'll own it. It's okay. It might be true. So it's a fabulous program, right? They're creating new pediatric devices in their classes, in the labs, under mentorship. The design teams, they tackle real-world challenges, real-world problems that come in from the Riley physicians. They get paired, it's typically 3, 4, 5 seniors, paired with a Riley physician paired with several Weldon School faculty who have already successfully navigated this and have experience bringing products to market. And so that's a team that gets formed around every single one of these projects. Last year, we had 166 students in senior design. There were 70 plus mentors, if you can believe that. It's a pretty impressive mentor group. And they delivered incredible solutions. There were 35 team projects, and we got 10 of those to be pediatric focused. And I'll smile as I say that. So a couple of examples. One of the student projects, like I said, they get presented a need. By the end of the semester, they have to have a working prototype device. So one of the neonatologists expressed interest in the need that infants that are born prematurely, and it's actually like 1 out of 10 as of 2017. It's more than you might think. Or maybe they have certain health conditions. They have to get nutritional supplements. They aren't getting enough nutrition from breast milk or the formula that they're already getting. And so what this doctor asked was, well, we don't know what the variability is between mom to mom. We don't know what the variability is between infant to infant. What would really be nice is if we could take a personalized medicine approach and be able to understand this infant needs exactly this nutrition. This mom produces this nutrition profile. So I know that, then I know exactly what I need to prescribe for supplement. And so that was one of the challenges to the senior design team. They'll have to name their device. They named this Nutrix. So the Nutrix breast milk analyzer, it analyzes mother's milk. It says the nutrients and lets the readout tells you about what the nutrients are in mother's milk. So then the nurses and the physicians can be able to augment that more specifically. The second one is affectionately known as the peanut. I love this thing. I think I show it in every presentation. This is for babies with cleft palate. So a lot of babies born with cleft palate, right? They have a cavity in the roof of their mouth. Because of that, they can't form a sucking motion, which means they can't take a bottle, or they can't nurse from mom. So they get feeding tubes in their mouths and noses. And so we had a group of students who was paired with a Riley ENT physician and a mother of a kid with cleft palate working on a project to see, can we design a device that would cover that cavity in the roof of the mouth, and if we could, in a way that the person could simultaneously nurse, then the baby could be able to nurse even though they have the cleft palate. And so the students came up with this. This is a 3D printed prototype. If we were going to make this would obviously be made out of some softer materials, and not that we're having babies with this hard plastic in their mouth, but the idea is to cover that cavity in the cleft palate, and then they're able to breastfeed, and that promotes a whole host of things. Certainly health aspects to it, but also the emotional bonding. If your kid's there and you can't breastfeed, or you can't even give a bottle because they just have the tubes, you miss out on that really precious time of just holding your little one during feeding. So this was something our students designed, again, in collaboration with a Riley physician. Yeah.
Can the peanut be customizable depending on the shape and the size of the?
I believe that's exactly where it needs to head. I think it could be customizable by each kid. And if you could do that in the hospital right there at the point of care, that would be ideal. Would be I think so, Joe. Last example, this is an emergency medicine. And this is a device that's between, kind of jointly designed between faculty and with some of the students that they affectionately named Sonic Tap, okay? So Sonic Tap is a device that when you take the ultrasound probe and you hold it against a spine, okay, if there are bacteria, okay, those bacteria will clump into lines, and you can kind of see that here. Now, why would anybody care about that? Well, the idea is spinal meningitis can occur in some of these kids, and it's really difficult to diagnose. The parents bring the baby to the ER, and the baby is fussy and has a fever. How many conditions cause a baby to be fussy and have a fever, right? The doctors have told me this is their worst nightmare. To have a baby, parents show up with a baby that's fussy and has a fever and says, what's wrong with my kid? And it could be anything to they're just a little colicky to they have spinal meningitis infection. And so this technology is really meant to try to reduce the practice that they're doing now. Currently, what happens is if they suspect meningitis, they have to take the baby, they have to do a spinal tap, which means they stick a needle in the lower abdomen. And I suspect there's a few people in here who've had that procedure before. It's not the most comfortable thing. And they have to draw out fluid from the baby's spine. Then they have to go test it and see, are there bacteria in the fluid? And is it that particular bacteria that causes the meningitis? So as you can imagine, doctors are not excited about having to do that. Parents are even less excited about the thought of having their child get a spinal tap, that's, the little baby. So the idea is this technology that's been developed in the Weldon School will allow, if a baby comes in and they actually do have an infection, by just doing the ultrasound probe on it, they'll be able to see this kind of aggregation, these lines, which are the bacteria that get lined up because of the magical science that they figured out with the ultrasound waves that causes this phenomenon. And so they can better understand. And the goal is they would do this as a screening tool, and they obviously have to show reliability. But if they can show really good reliability, they would have a baby come in, they do a simple ultrasound on the spine. If this is clear, no spinal tap. If it's like this, then they would do a spinal tap with the idea of let's reduce unnecessary spinal taps in children in the ER. So another example. Any questions? Yeah.
Could you use that on adults as well?
Yeah, I believe that's so. Do you know, George? I think that's so.
So too, but I
Yeah.
think they really focused
But
on
it's-
the pediatric case first.
They have.
Maybe because they met with emergency medicine doctors.
Who said this is my worst nightmare?
Yeah, well, it's the worst year.
Yeah, and we've had a number of emergency medicine senior design projects that are coming to us from Riley. Just a couple more slides. Anything more? That's a lot of what I want to share around our means of collaborating and being able to bring these things forward and being able to advance these devices for these kids. All right, just 2 more slides. Go ahead.
I have a question. If you watch TV, you'll see there's other of these major pediatric hospitals. St. Luke,
Yeah,
St.
sure.
Jude
sure.
is one of them. Are there similar sort of things going on at those hospitals?
Some of them.
Are we truly a unique combination of a bunch of variables?
I would say it's true that some of them are doing it. Nobody is doing it the way we're doing it, with this collaborative model, using big and mid-sized company partners in the development and being able to collaborate across institutions. I don't know of anybody who has that model. A lot of them are either individual physician innovators, or maybe they have some startup money that they've been awarded and they're taking the startup company route. But I don't know of anybody following this model. Yeah.
Your collaborative model is interesting, and you got to plug the results. As a research administrator for a long time, I know there are a lot of things that can get in the way of collaboration that involves universities, hospitals, and corporations. In fact, I used to negotiate with Bill Cook and Steve Lewis over these exact issues. And how have you gotten over who owns the intellectual property, publication rights?
I'm so glad you asked that. I meant to say that earlier. So I almost want to call it a minor miracle. But everybody got together and said, this is not the next billion-dollar startup unicorn. There's not loads of money in this. You know, Cook is interested in developing devices for kids, knowing this is not going to be a large moneymaker. They actually have a signed contract. They got all the attorneys to agree, if you can imagine, between IU School of Medicine and Purdue and Cook Medical, that all the IP stays with the inventors and the investigators. And the company takes no ownership piece whatsoever.
First licensing rights.
They would like first licensing rights. They would like, if there's something that looks promising, they'd like a chance to say, I want to invest in funds in that and develop it. But that was the trade-off.
It's not been that long ago that we negotiated the first deal where a company researcher came into a university laboratory and did research with a university faculty member. And that was quite a trip doing that.
I'll bet.
Can you say a bit more about your students' background? Are they coming from ME, double E, materials engineering? What's the mixture of the background of your students that are moving in this direction to work with you?
So these are largely biomedical engineering students who come in, but we're looking at collaborations that involve the other traditional engineering schools. I came out of one myself. But these are primarily BME students and BME faculty. They're med students. The catheter project has a third-year MD, PhD student from IU School of Medicine in it who's doing a PhD here and working the MD there. It's fairly broad in terms of each individual student background, but these are primarily Weldon School students. All right. Okay, last couple minutes. I wanted to give you a slide about things we're doing on the education side and things we're doing on the research side. I mentioned we are very focused on educating the next generation of pediatric innovators. Two things I would mention. We have created the world's first course on pediatric medical devices anywhere in the world. We're pretty sure of that because nobody can find a textbook. So we're going to have to write it. And that gentleman right back there was the real ringleader to start that, Professor Waninger. It's co-directed by Professor Waninger and Danielle Serrano, a nephrologist at the School of Medicine. So we have co-directors for the course. We have faculty come in from the medical school. We have faculty from the engineering school, and a real mix of topics around areas of medicine, unmet needs, problems with existing solutions. In addition, our company partners have their experts come in and they also lecture. OrthoPediatrics is coming in to lecture about orthopedics in November. Cook Medical comes in and talks about the medical device development process in more detail. It's a real collaborative effort, even in the teaching, so that they get real world experience and real input on existing unmet problems in the clinic. We have, I think you said maybe when you first offered it, maybe we'd get a dozen students, and there were 40 who signed up, and they had to cap it at 40 because there's only 40 chairs in the lecture room. They've had to do that 3 years now. They've offered it 3 years. We've had it at 3 years, and every year we've hit 40 for maximum enrollment for this. There's a lot of interest in this from the students. Every one of those classes, students are assigned a research team and paired with a mentor, and teams of 3, 4, 5 students have a research project they work on. So there are 29 pediatric research projects that have come about because of the course requirement for that. The other thing that we're very actively developing is working on a clinical immersion experience, not to be biased to the NICU, but bringing our engineering students into the NICU. And the Riley physicians are very excited about this. We ran our first pilot 2 weeks ago. We had overwhelmingly positive information from the students. They love the experience. They come in, they spend the morning rounding with the physicians and asking questions just like on the med students do. Then we have a specific didactic session over lunch on a particular NICU topic and need. They bring in technicians, they bring in nurses, they go out to the floor and see specific kids with these problems, and then we come back and do a debrief and ask questions and suggestions for the future. We ran our first one, and we're looking to do more of this. They want our engineering students in the hospital. We want our engineering students in the hospital. It gives so much more context for what they're trying to do in their classes. And then lastly, I guess I will say, creating the future. We are involved in AI. I think everybody's involved in AI today. We're specifically working with cardiology, pediatric cardiology at Riley, around looking at imaging for kids who get heart transplants and looking at the development of their coronary arteries and blood vessels. And we have a team in the Weldon School, faculty and students, who are taking MR images and are applying AI techniques to better diagnose what's going on, with the connections and the anastomoses for the coronary arteries. And so that's one example of what we're doing in AI. Another one is interventional MRI. A lot of us go in and get an MRI, we get a scan, we get a film, we get an image, and then somebody says, well, here's what it means. We're looking at translating that to actually do procedures in the magnet. And that is a collaboration between Cook Medical, with Siemens Health Engineers, and with the Purdue faculty here, as we're all working together to figure out how to optimize what would be an interventional MRI suite and what are the target procedures, especially for pediatrics. If we can remove the follow-ups that kids get through radiation and take that radiation exposure away from them, we can vastly improve their health and let them just be followed with MRI and let them have their procedures through MRI and not fluoroscopy. So,
Is most of that taking place in Indianapolis, or is it here on campus as well?
it's here on campus, it's in Indianapolis and the research park. And it's it's happening several places at once. The last things we have to do, we're focusing on our sweet spots. We're figuring out there are so many needs. We can't do all of them. So we're trying to figure out what are the ideal projects that we can move forward and help the most kids with. We're continuing to be very Indiana-centric for now. We think there's a lot more work to do with collaborating with more Indiana companies and institutions, but we plan to take it outside of Indiana. We're focusing and looking at philanthropy in order to have more resources. We want to be able to do more projects at scale. There's a lot more projects we could advance if we had additional resources. So our sources are like foundations, interested individuals, looking at grants. The partners in the consortium provided some initial startup funds, but most of it's all in kind, and we're all working together physically in most of these things. And then lastly, building additional partnerships. We've got 2 industry partners. We're heavily courting a third one. We're optimistic, fingers crossed, that that's going to be good news later this fall. But attracting the right corporate partners who have the right value set, who have the right technologies and an interest in projects that we're working on, and pairing those things up has been a key. And we're getting a lot more strategic about how to do that. So with that, here's our website if you want more information, and you can find me over in the Weldon School if you would like for me to talk to you more about any of these things. I mentioned the video about faith. It's on YouTube. You can find it on the Weldon School website as well. And with that, any questions?
Inspiring set of outstanding cases. Thank you for sharing all those with us.
Very welcome.
We may have time for a couple of questions, additional questions, and then we'll enjoy each other's company and refreshment.
I
Please.
do have one question, because it seems like there's an engineering language, and then there's a physician language, and you're trying to put them together. So how do you make that happen?
Well, we are putting it together, and you're right. And I think that's part of that comment I heard that from the physicians, that the engineers ask different questions. They think differently as well, right? Part of that is the engineering students get a lot of anatomy, physiology, and those sorts of things in their studies, in their classes in the undergraduate program. The graduate course certainly forces that together when you've got engineers and clinicians talking about specific unmet needs. It's just part of learning. I graduated I'm a 3-time engineering grad from Purdue, and one of the first things I did was take my Guyton medical textbooks with me, and my first couple of years just really studying it. Some of it is you just continue to learn, and as you're working on a particular project, that has addressing a particular physical need, you become more expert at it, just like you would if it's a materials topic. The more you study it, the more you learn.
As we all seem to learn more about every day about the federal approval process, how does that seem to impact what you're doing, and is that a challenge for you to move ahead?
We actually don't have a lot of federal support from us. We're kind of, I almost want to say homegrown. We are supported by the school, Weldon School, the Department of Pediatrics at the IU school, and the companies. We don't have big federal dollars coming into this. There are big federal dollars out there that we're planning to go after. But at this time, we really haven't seen much of an effect. Is there anything you would add to that, George?
I don't know if the question was around regulatory approvals or...
Oh, I thought it was about funding. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Funding again, and then of course you have to have the approval to go to market.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how does the FDA treat pediatric devices?
FDA really wants pediatric devices, but I'm going to be perfectly honest with my opinion. They have a twofold mandate. Their mandate is to improve the public health, right? Bring new treatments along, but also protect the public health. And it can be very easy to be very risk averse in allowing new treatments for babies and little kids. And so it's just something you have to overcome, honestly, with relationship and building credibility. But they do really want to see more pediatric devices. It's not always easier for peds, but they have been very creative in some of their regulatory strategies and being willing to listen and take an adaptive approach of where there are cases that there's adult data that actually are relevant, and they will consider that valid scientific evidence. So they are trying to be flexible while still maintaining safety for the kids. It's encouraging. Any of these, it's not easy, but if you do good science, you do excellent science, and you have a very reasonable person at FDA, you can build that relationship and you can demonstrate what you need to demonstrate to them to allow an approval or to allow a clinical trial.
If I might ask one other question, obviously when you're working with NICU babies, how much of a challenge is it that what works there as they grow in age?
It's a big challenge. The neonatologists like to remind me that these babies double or quadruple in size from birth to when they go home. Now think about that. Babies will quadruple in size during their NICU stay, some of these kids. So growing kids present incredible design challenges. It's a space for tissue-based devices. It's a space for clever engineering that are adjustable kinds of devices, self-expanding, some of those kinds of things. But the growing child is a real challenge, in order to create a device that's going to be with them, presumably for decades. And they like to go to the playground and hang upside down on monkey bars, and a lot of us don't do that anymore, right? So there are all kinds of challenges around the pediatric design.
Certainly endorse Riley. We
Oh,
had
yes.
personal experience with Riley, with our daughter. And one of the things that I can remember one of the doctors telling us was that if she had been born a few years earlier, they would not have been able to save her. It was because of this type of reason.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Let's take one last
more?
question.
Okay. Yes.
I'm just curious about when you said you had trouble getting people to participate in clinical trials. So is it that parents are afraid this device will hurt their child? I can understand that it may or may not be successful, but are they not willing to take that risk, or are they afraid that this device could hurt their child?
It's actually more complicated than that. From the parent's perspective, some are that way. Some are, this is an investigational device. I don't want anybody experimenting on my baby. not understanding an investigation is different than an experiment, and why would you expect them to know the difference? But you know, there are debates about ethics. You know, some people say, oh, it's unethical the kids can't consent, and you know, what about all these things? And then you have other ethicists who say it's not ethical to keep them out of trials because this could very greatly benefit them, and all this, you know, preliminary work has been demonstrating that it's safe. And it's a very complicated situation. But from a parent's point of view, I think it's more of a fear. I don't want to hurt my kid, and I don't want somebody, you know, experimenting on my kid. So.
Well, clearly you've done great work of bringing back.
Thank you for having me.